There's a Lego collection at the center of this that one family spent decades building. Star Wars sets, mostly, a lot of them still sealed in the box, the kind collectors hunt for, and the agreed value on it was somewhere around $200,000. They handed it to a second-hand toy store in Salem, Oregon to sell on their behalf, and they have spent the last 2.5 years trying to get it back. That's a small and fairly ordinary American disaster, right up until the point where roughly 20 million people got involved, a court order stopped a journalist from publishing, police body camera footage leaked out of a Utah city, a YouTuber left the country, and a 2-word phrase started showing up in comment sections that had absolutely nothing to do with plastic bricks. One that pairs my church with organized crime. So tonight, the Latter-day Saint response to the Lego scandal and what actually happened. It's a business dispute over toys. It should have stayed one. What makes it an episode is the turn it took, when a franchise argument in Oregon became a story about my church, and a phrase from the 1840s came back with a fresh coat of paint. So what I'm after isn't the store or the YouTuber. It's the move where a coincidence gets upgraded into a conspiracy because it happens to be religious. You know how this channel works by now. Serious about the question, fair to everybody in it, and faithful without the volume. 30 seconds of housekeeping and then the timeline. We're only a handful of episodes in here, and the whole job of this channel is telling this faith story straight, including the weeks it looks ridiculous. If you want more of that, the like button and the subscribe button are what actually move something this small. And say hello down there. Tell me what country you're in. I like knowing how far this stuff travels. So, what actually happened in order with dates. And where something is a claim rather than an established fact, I'm going to say so out loud. Bricks Minifigs is a franchise chain that buys and resells used Lego. Not a Lego company, an independent business with stores scattered across the country, and its corporate headquarters sits in Utah County, Utah. Hold that detail, it matters later, and not for the reason you think. November 2023. The Mansells consigned the collection to the Salem, Oregon store. By November of 2024, according to the reporting, about half of it has sold. And that same month, the corporate side terminates its franchise agreement with the people running the Salem store, Crystal Law and Benjamin Gorman, over defaulted accounts. The remaining inventory gets repossessed. Now sit with the position that leaves the family in. Their property was in a store that stopped being that store. The people they signed with are gone. And when they come asking for what's left, the corporate side's position is that it was never a party to their consignment agreement in the first place. That's not nothing as a legal argument. It's also, if you're the family, a $200,000 answer that amounts to talk to somebody who no longer exists. Then a YouTuber gets involved, and the whole thing changes shape. On the 21st of May, 2026, a creator named Ben Schneider, who works under the name Reckless Ben, publishes a video titled, "I Tracked Down the Thief Who Stole $200,000 of Lego." Same day, Bricks Minifigs corporate puts out a statement saying it was not a party to the consignment. A week later, on the 28th, the company files for a temporary restraining order against Schneider, against Brian Mansell, and against a third man named Victor Nguyen. On the 30th, Schneider publishes Part 2. It's called, "I Got Arrested Because of Legos," and this is the video that changes the subject of the entire story. Because in Part 2, Schneider alleges that officers of the American Fork Police Department in Utah County are colluding with the men now operating the store, Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson, to shut his investigation down. And he adds a detail that becomes the whole story for about 2 weeks. He says the officers involved are all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Per his account, he and his crew were stopped, searched, and arrested in American Fork on the 10th of March, charged with stalking, targeted picketing, and trespassing. And after he made bail, another warrant went out, and he left for Mexico rather than sit in a Utah jail. Then it accelerates. On the 3rd of June, a folder appears online containing what's presented as unredacted body camera footage from the American Fork Police, and the clips circulating from it are read by millions of people as showing officers doing favors. On the 4th, Bricks Minifigs announces the immediate closure of the Salem store and says it has reached a mutual agreement to part ways with Best and Johnson. The company's chief executive, Ammon McNeff, publicly offers to compensate the Mansell family and to talk about dropping the lawsuit. And on the 9th of June, a judge named Tony F. Graff, Jr. approves serving the restraining order by email, which has the practical effect of stopping Schneider from publishing Part 3. A GoFundMe for the family passes $450,000, more than twice the value of the collection. That's the spine. And I want to flag the honest limit right here, before anybody in the comments beats me to it. Almost every contested piece of that is still contested. Who owed what to whom, what the officers knew, whether anything criminal happened at all. None of that is settled. Some of it is in litigation, and I'm not going to pretend from a desk that I know how a court is going to come out. What I can tell you is what's on the record and what is somebody's claim. Everything I just called an allegation is an allegation. Now, the part that made it enormous, because the scale of this is the reason we're talking about it at all, this did not stay a Utah story or a Lego story. CoffeeZilla, who normally investigates crypto fraud, put up an investigation that's pulled close to 8 million views. A channel called The Civil Rights Lawyer covered the arrest and cleared 5 million. Penguin Z0, one of the largest commentary channels on the platform, ran video after video, one of them over 6 million. Law by Mike, over 2 million. Philip DeFranco covered the leaked footage. The Young Turks covered it. Local news in Salt Lake covered it, and one ABC4 Utah segment on the police accusations alone did over 200,000. So do the arithmetic on the attention. Somewhere north of 20 million views, concentrated inside about 3 weeks. Most of it from audiences with no connection to Utah and no particular opinion about my church one way or the other. And that's the thing to understand about how this went wrong for us. No hostile channel had to attack anybody. 20 million people who had never spent 1 minute of their lives thinking about Latter-day Saints got their first real exposure to us through a story in which a man says he was arrested by a police department that all belonged to the same church. First impressions do not get much worse than that, and no amount of correcting the record afterward ever reaches the same people. So let me do the hard thing now and build the case against my own neighbors properly. Because if I skip this part, everything after it is worthless. Here's the strongest version, and I'm going to make it as strong as I can. It goes like this. Nobody has to hold a secret meeting for a closed system to protect its own. When the police officer, the business owner, the city council member, the judge, and the guy who owns the rental house all attend the same congregation, know each other's parents, coach each other's kids, and will see each other on Sunday, favoritism doesn't require a conspiracy. It requires familiarity, and familiarity is free. Every sociologist who studies institutional capture will tell you that homogeneity plus low outside scrutiny is the recipe, and it doesn't matter whether the shared thing is a religion, a fraternity, a union, or a small town's high school football team. It just needs to be shared. So when an outsider walks into a county where 4 out of 5 people belong to one church and says this feels like a closed shop, that is not bigotry. That's an accurate description of a structural risk. And members who reflexively deny it are denying something the research supports. And the second half of the case is harder for me. On the 9th of June, a court order had the effect of stopping a journalist from publishing a video. Not a church, a court. But the sequence, a company sues, a judge signs, and the third installment of an investigation into that company never comes out, should bother you no matter who's involved. and it should bother a Latter-day Saint more than most, because this faith spent the 1840s and the 1880s on the receiving end of exactly that machinery. And I'll add the third piece myself, since we've walked it on this channel. If you've seen Part 3 of the Joseph Smith series, you know that. In 1838, in Missouri, a secret armed band really did form among the saints, the Danites. Not a rumor, a real organization, later exaggerated into something enormous, but it existed. So when somebody in 2026 says the saints close ranks and protect each other against outsiders, they are not inventing the accusation. They are reaching for a very old one. And the reason it's available to reach for is that once, in a specific place, under specific pressure, there was something to it. Put those three together, and you get a case that deserves a real answer instead of a press release. So here's the answer. And it turns on one distinction that almost nobody in those 20 million views bothered to make. There are two different claims wearing the same clothes, and they are not close to equal. The first claim is that in a county where most people share one faith, institutions need outside scrutiny because shared identity makes accountability harder. That claim is reasonable. I'd go further. I think it's true, and I think it's true in Provo and in Salem and in every company town in America. If the body camera footage shows officers doing favors for a friend, then officers did favors for a friend, and it should cost them their jobs. And their being Latter-day Saints makes it worse rather than better, because they'd be doing it in a place that talks constantly about integrity. A member who reads that sentence as an attack on the faith has the whole thing upside down. Wanting that footage examined is the faithful position. Wanting it buried is not. The second claim is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the institution, was somehow behind a missing pile of Lego in Oregon. And that one has an interesting property. Nobody who made it ever produced a single piece of evidence for it. Not a name, not a document, not a phone call, not a dollar. In 3 weeks and 20 million views, no one connected any church entity, any leader, any fund, or any office to any part of this. What they had was the observation that a lot of the people involved happened to be Latter-day Saints. In a county where, by the usual estimates, around 80% of residents are. That's not a finding, that's the base rate. Run the same logic somewhere else and hear how it sounds. If a used car dealership in rural Alabama gets into an ugly dispute and the owner, the sheriff, and the judge all turn out to be Baptists, nobody types Baptist Mafia. Nobody writes a thread about the Southern Baptist Convention's stranglehold on employment and reputation. It's understood as what happens when a lot of people in one place go to the same kind of church. The exact same fact pattern in Utah County produced a conspiracy theory. That's the frame I named at the top, and that is what I'm actually here to object to, not the scrutiny, the upgrade. And a magazine called Public Square, writing about this while it was still hot, put the pattern into one sentence better than I'm going to. When Latter-day Saints are good, it's in spite of their religion. But when they're evil, it's because of their religion. Read the comments sections, and you'll see that rule operating with almost no exceptions. The officers who behaved properly were just officers. The ones accused of misconduct were Latter-day Saint officers. But there's a fair question sitting underneath all of this that deserves better than I've given it so far. Why does it always seem to be a Utah company? I've got an honest answer, and half of it is going to sting. Start with the boring half. Utah genuinely does run heavy on franchises, direct sales, and small cap startups, at a rate way out of proportion to its size. Some of that is ordinary economics, cheap land, a young population, low unemployment. And a real piece of it traces back to something specific about this faith. Every year, this church sends tens of thousands of 19 and 20-year-olds out to knock on doors for 2 years. They come home at 21 having spent 2 years being told no 40 times a day, often in a second language, having learned to run a schedule, work a territory, and keep going after rejection. That is, whether anybody planned it this way or not, a sales academy operating at national scale, and it graduates into a state the size of one large city. You end up with a lot of franchises headquartered in Utah County for the same reason you end up with a lot of software in Seattle. The labor pool is right there. Now the half that stings, and I'd rather say it than have somebody say it at me. Utah has a fraud problem, and it is specifically a religious one. Not members defrauding outsiders, members defrauding each other. It's called affinity fraud, and it works because trust inside a congregation is real and unearned by the person exploiting it. Somebody who uses the right words, holds the right calling, speaks at the right funeral, gets a hearing that a stranger with the same pitch would never get, and then the money goes. Regulators in Utah have been warning about this for decades in plain language, and in 2016 the state did something no other state in the country had done. It stood up a public white-collar crime offender registry, a searchable list with photographs of people convicted of financial fraud. And the reason the legislature built it was that Utahns kept handing their savings to people they'd met at church. So run that against the story we're discussing. Is there a real phenomenon in Utah where shared faith and money get tangled together and somebody gets hurt? Yes. It's documented, it's embarrassing. Church leaders have preached against it from the pulpit in General Conference, and I'm not going to stand here and wave it off. But look at the direction it points. Affinity fraud is the exact opposite of a mafia. In a mafia, the in-group closes ranks against outsiders. In affinity fraud, the in-group is the victim, and the only qualification you need to rob it is knowing the vocabulary. The real Utah problem isn't that this community is hard to get into, it's that it's easy, and that a stranger who shows up saying the right things gets handed a chair and a checkbook. 20 million people were told the story of an impenetrable religious cartel. The documented pathology is the reverse, and it's sadder, and nobody's making a music video about it. Which brings us to the title, and to something I found genuinely interesting. There was no single response. There were about 5 of them, and they disagreed with each other. Start with the one the title of this episode is answering. A channel called All Those in Favor, which is a Latter-day Saint commentary show, put out an episode on exactly this that has done around 140,000 views, walking through the facts and the local angle rather than defending anybody. Then they did something I did not expect. They sat down with Ben Schneider himself, the man making the accusations, and put it out with another Latter-day Saint channel. That interview has done over 200,000. Think about what that is. A faithful show platformed the guy accusing their neighbors on their own channel and let him talk. Whatever you make of his claims, that is not the behavior of a closed shop. From the other side of the same community, the ex-member podcast we covered in the lawsuit episode a while back ran a live stream on it that went nearly 4 hours. Another commentary show put out a whole episode on the religion angle alone. Public Square magazine published the essay I just quoted. And then, because this is the internet, Latter-day Saint creators made music videos about the Mafia line, which other channels reacted to, which is how a scandal about theft turned into a genre. I want to defend that last one for a second, because I suspect some of you winced at it. When an accusation is genuinely absurd, laughing at it is more effective than arguing with it, and it's a lot more attractive. A member making a joke about the Mafia line is doing something 100 carefully sourced rebuttals can't do. He's refusing the premise while looking relaxed. That's a good instinct, and I'd like to see more of it. And notice one more thing about that list. Every single item on it is a member, or a former member, or a magazine, not the church. The church said nothing, put out no statement, and issued no defense, and that was correct. Because a franchise dispute in Oregon has nothing to do with the church. And the fastest way to make an institution look guilty of something is to have it hold a press conference about something it wasn't part of. Which leaves the part of this I actually want members to hear. And it's the uncomfortable one. Some of us handled this badly. Not most, and not the ones I just described, but enough that it's worth saying. There was a reflex in certain corners to treat the entire thing as persecution, to skip past the specific question and land straight on, they hate us. And that reflex did two things, both bad. It let the actual question go unanswered, and it confirmed the stereotype in the same motion. If your response to "did those officers behave properly" is, "why is everybody always attacking my church?" you haven't defended anything. You've changed the subject in front of 20 million people. The confident version costs nothing and sounds like this. I don't know what that footage shows. Somebody should find out, and if it's bad, they should be fired. And no, none of that has anything to do with what I believe on Sunday. That's it. That's the whole answer. It concedes what's true, refuses what isn't, and leaves nothing for anyone to argue with. And it's the answer this faith's own scripture is a lot closer to than the defensive one, since a church that teaches that men will be punished for their own sins is not a church with a doctrinal stake in protecting a police officer in American fork. So where does it actually stand? Here's what's documented, and here's what isn't. Documented. A family consigned a collection worth around $200,000 and did not get all of it back. A franchise agreement was terminated and inventory was repossessed. The store in Salem closed on the 4th of June, and the company cut ties with the men running it. The chief executive publicly offered to make the family whole. A court order stopped a journalist from publishing. Strangers on the internet put more than $450,000 into a fund for a family they'd never met, which is more than the collection was ever worth, and is, if you back all the way up, the actual headline of this entire story. Not documented. Any involvement at any level by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Not one thread of it offered by anyone in 3 weeks of maximum attention with millions of people looking. And if there were, understand something. The people who would be angriest about it are Latter-day Saints, because we're the ones who have to live in the reputation. The whole thing comes back to a man who just wanted his Legos. Brian Mansell walked into a store in Oregon with the collection he'd spent his life on, and he trusted a piece of paper, and the paper didn't hold. That's the story. Everything wrapped around it was somebody else's. So tell me down in the comments, and be straight with me, because I'll be reading. Did this story reach you before this video? And what was your honest first reaction the first time you saw that phrase? Because I'll tell you mine. I laughed, and then about 10 seconds later, I didn't. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, the other episode where I take a viral framing apart piece by piece is the one on the church's lawsuit against its best-known critic, which had the same shape and about the same amount of care taken with it. I'm Nathan Reeves. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.